But today we're here on another very serious topic. The opioid epidemic is a public health and a public safety crisis in our state. It has destroyed lives and taken the lives of far too many people. Illicit manufactured fentanyl has caused this crisis to explode even further. Deaths from overdoses, and particularly overdoses from fentanyl, are increasing at alarming rates. Recent headlines have shocked our state and our nation and demand action. A child lost their life after ingesting fentanyl in school. 40 bags were found in the school, 100 more in the child's home. It's a parent's worst nightmare, a loss no parent should ever experience, a tragedy no classmate should ever experience. Then there is Lauren Smith Fields, a 23-year-old Bridgeport woman gone too soon and found to have fentanyl in her system. Of the 1,374 lives lost to overdose in Connecticut in 2020, 84% of those deaths involved fentanyl. That's over 1,000 lives lost. It's also a tripling of the percentage of deaths involving fentanyl just 5 years ago. Fentanyl is a deadly poison, and it must be treated as such. Illicit fentanyl is evil. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, 2 milligrams of fentanyl, the size of a few grains of salt, can be a lethal dose. What I have is a photo from the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Lab. On the left is a lethal dose of heroin, on the right, a lethal dose of fentanyl. So you can see that a lethal dose is minuscule. Illicit fentanyl kills like nothing we have seen before, and it is taking the lives of far too many in our communities, our loved ones, and most especially the folks right here in Connecticut. For that reason, we are proposing the following 3 steps that Connecticut must take to address this issue. Number 1, increase the penalties for selling fentanyl, illicit fentanyl. Number 2, support schools with guidance and access to Narcan. And 3, invest in awareness and safety. At this point, I would like to introduce Senator John Kissel, who's our ranking member on Judiciary, to further explain our proposals on increased penalties.
Thank you very much, Senator Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. As Senator Kelly indicated, I'm very honored to serve as ranking senator on the Judiciary Committee, a committee that I've served on for almost 28 years now, and I have a very good working relationship with Representative Staffstrom, Senator Winfield, and my very bright and hard-working fellow ranking member from the House, Craig Fishbein. What we're proposing is to address the issue of fentanyl head-on, and to those folks who say, oh, you Republicans, you only say increased penalties and mandatory minimums, but in this instance, this is a deadly serious situation. And yes, we're proposing that we increase penalties for fentanyl and have mandatory minimums. And exactly what those will be, I'm going to discuss that with one of our attorneys, Brian Caffarelli, but I can tell you right now that the first meeting of the Judiciary Committee leadership is scheduled for a week from now. February 3rd, and this will definitely be one of the issues at the top of our agenda, and I will make sure that we discuss it. Why increase the penalties? Well, if you have an opportunity to talk to someone who's a recovering drug addict, who might be on the older side, they'll say it's not like, and they're honest, the good old days. Now, I didn't know that when heroin was the drug of choice for a lot of hardcore addicts, that those were the quote-unquote good old days. But I've had an opportunity to talk to recovering drug addicts, and they said at least you knew what you were getting most of the time. And they were able to assess how much to put in the needle and inject into their arms or wherever part of their body was available to do that. And they shook their head when I talked to them, and I said, well, what about fentanyl? And they said, no one knows. No one knows. You might think you're getting XYZ, but depending on where you got it, it could definitely, as Senator Kelly pointed out, kill you a little bit. Just think, a couple grains of salt. What's the ratio? The ratio is that fentanyl can be up to 50 times as potent as a similar amount of heroin. So we feel that if you had a bag of fentanyl and its equivalent is 50 bags of heroin, that those penalties should be proportionate. It's not just a knee-jerk reaction, increase the penalties. I would suggest that if you compare a knife to a bomb, which is more dangerous to the public health? Well, you could do a lot of damage with a knife if used inappropriately, and there is appropriate use for fentanyl in a medical setting if prescribed and the proper dosage. But a bomb, again used with malicious intent, blow up whole buildings. Well, fentanyl's the same thing. Fentanyl's on the streets. It's my understanding, again, I don't have personal knowledge, but in talking to individuals that had been involved in illicit drug usage, it's their belief that it's manufactured in China, shipped to Mexico, and then brought into the United States. We also suggest, and whether we can get our arms around it in the next 3 months or whether we have to conduct further studies, is the notion of fentanyl analogous substances, substantially similar chemical compositions. And we wouldn't want someone who's out there selling this drug to not necessarily be charged because there's a slight chemical change in the substance. And one of the other committees that I serve on is general law. We have cognizance over Department of Consumer Protection, which has cognizance over pharmaceuticals and pharmacies in the state of Connecticut. And drawing those distinctions is not always easy. But again, we feel that the threat to innocent individuals is out there, and so we want to get our arms around someone who changes the chemical composition a little bit to try to avoid the penalties. And so we feel that that's fruit for further investigation, and we would think that it's only fair that an individual be charged appropriately. And when I talk about the analogous substances, it's not the ones that are adulterated, where you would take the pure fentanyl and say cut it with something like rat poison or something else just to increase your amount of quantity to increase your profits. The last point that I'll make is this. We believe in second chances. This isn't about the victims. This isn't about users. This is about sellers. This is about the supply chain throughout the United States and into other countries. They don't care. It's all about money. It's all about profit. And if you look at this, every one of those flags is someone we lost. It's my understanding that we lose to drugs in Connecticut as many lives as we lost in the entire Vietnam War from Connecticut. That's happening over and over. This is a scourge. This is a horror. As Senator Kelly pointed out, no mom or dad No loved one wants to see a young child die this way before their time. Senseless. It's insidious. So it's a deadly serious situation. We want to take appropriate measures. We want stiff penalties for sellers because they're doing harm to our most precious individuals, our children, the future of Connecticut, but also adults. And it's time that we address this issue now. Thank you. Senator Kelly?
Thank you very much, John. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce Senator Craig Minor to discuss the additional components of our proposal to support schools and invest in awareness. Senator?
Thank you, Kevin. So the other prong of our approach is dealing with establishing policies that could be used by municipalities both for the presence of naloxone and for training. And we believe that it is important for the state to step up at this time, given the fact that we've all kind of known that this situation has existed, but now we are very keenly aware that it exists at a rather high level in our public schools. And what I mean by that is, Senator Kelly held up a photo before of the granules of fentanyl that it takes to, in some cases, create death. I would suggest to you that it might be no more than the amount of dander that would be on my blue suspenders today if I didn't have my mask on for the last hour. It is that small an amount. And we think it's critical that the State Department of Education begin the work, if they haven't already, in trying to create model policy that each municipality could adopt very easily through their Board of Education. So it would no longer be a question of whether we recognize the risk here in the state of Connecticut. It would no longer be a question of whether we think we could develop a statewide program. It would come down to a municipality theoretically saying, we like that one and we're going to put that one in place. A simple vote of a Board of Education. Now, when I watched what happened in Hartford, it became clear to me that not every school system has naloxone, and not every school has a policy. In fact, I bet a lot of people were looking around the city of Hartford at that very moment when they realized someone was going to pass and said, uh-oh, uh-oh. The state allowed parents to have it. They allowed brothers and sisters of addicts to have it. They hand it out in many places in larger communities to try and make sure that if someone is experiencing an overdose, it doesn't necessarily amount to a death. So we think it's time, and it's urgent, that the State Department of Education develop that policy. We believe that there will be enough money in the opioid settlement funds, that some of it could go toward this purpose. If there's training required at the local level, and I understand municipalities may want to do that, that training be put in place as soon as possible. And we believe that if there is a cost to have that product in the school system to try and make sure that students and teachers and administrators don't accidentally die. And that was a real possibility in Hartford, to be quite honest. When they cleaned everyone's shoes, that had to tell everyone how serious this problem is. So we think there's money already on its way here or here, and we think that we have an agency that could develop the policy, and that, in conjunction with some of our policies on law enforcement and penalties, we think will go a long way toward making this a safer and better situation for everyone in Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. Combating the opioid crisis and the deadly nature of fentanyl requires a comprehensive approach with continued support for substance abuse treatment, access to life-saving measures, and strong penalties for the trafficking of such deadly substances. This is a poison. This is something that kills in even the smallest amounts. It is past time to do whatever it takes to stop this killer.